Welcome to Whole. My name is David Stone, and this is Robert Grant, my friend. And
Mm.
we are talking all about faith, church, and mental health. And today we're going to talk about why did God allow this? Why did God
Mm.
allow this? Trauma, theology, and healing. And
Yes.
so the question, why did God allow this, is arguably one of the oldest and most persistent
Oh, yeah.
theological questions humans ask. Um,
Mm.
Philosophers call it theodicy. It's this attempt to reconcile the existence of a good and all powerful God, but the reality of suffering and evil. And
Yeah.
um, so let me see clinically, and I think this is where it intercepts with us. Clinically, trauma, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just a armchair clinician, right?
Armchair trauma guy.
Yeah, I'm an armchair trauma guide.
That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, that sounds very ugly. Clinically, trauma is what happens in the nervous system when an event overwhelms a person's ability to cope. The theological and clinical realities often collide in painful ways. Someone is trying to process both the neurological wound and the spiritual rupture or problem simultaneously. That dual wound is what makes this topic so important and so
Mhm.
complex. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. It sure
So
does.
I I think, just briefly, I mean, what does that look like? When someone, like for me as a pastor, I just think immediately, even in our church that we were a part of together, um, people who have had infertility issues for years and years and years and years, and they save money to have a big procedure, and then they have another miscarriage, and it's like that trauma, and then every Mother's Day or every Father's Day, it just keeps coming around, right? So that's
Yeah.
something real world. What about you? What do you
Yeah.
see people experience sometimes?
Well, first of all, trauma can be very individualized.
Okay.
Two people can go through the same type of thing, and one walks out with trauma response and one does not. And also, we understand trauma, probably everybody understands trauma through experiencing a traumatic event.
Hmm.
You were in a car accident, or, you watched your child drown and couldn't save them, or you were in your house and it burnt down and you barely got out. Some kind of traumatic event that we point to that, of course, then has created trauma issues for the person. But trauma can look a lot of other ways too. It can, again, back to being individualized, it can be developmental, it can be just ongoing experience of stress. I see this in kids a lot who maybe just year to year are getting bullied at school or rejected by peers, and it's developed a trauma response. We talked about neurodivergence a couple episodes ago,
Hmm.
living this neurodivergent life where if every system you go into is telling you, the way you do things is wrong,
Right.
it can create trauma. But I think, getting back to what we might see in this intersection, of church and faith and trauma, we're going to see all that. We're going
Mm.
to see people as, if you're in a church, there's going to be people sitting in that church with you who have been sexually, physically abused as kids, somebody who's maybe been raped or sexually assaulted, somebody who's went through traumatic events, like some of the ones that I mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that happen that aren't good, that create a lot of trauma.
Mm.
And so it's very likely you're going to be intersecting with people, uh, in your church, in your community, and whatever you're involved with, in connection with your faith, that have or are dealing with trauma issues.
Mm, it's good. It's good and bad, right? That's a good answer to a tough subject. Um, when someone comes to you carrying this trauma and maybe even having a faith crisis, which do you address first? And does that order even make sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Obviously, that has popped up for me, um, because I do a lot of trauma work. So, and I work with a lot of people who come in who have a strong faith system, or that's very important in their life. Um, so, I'm not sure that it's an addressing one first. I mean, I think clinically the issue, of course, is the trauma. This is what's disrupting their life, and they're needing like some help with
Mm-hmm.
clinically. Um, Unless the trauma is religious trauma, which we're going to put on the back burner because we're not talking about that in this episode.
Right.
That's a different episode. But
Yeah.
if it's just a matter of there's been a trauma and they're also a person of faith, and now they're kind of struggling in their faith maybe because of the trauma, like
Mm-hmm.
they're having doubts, or like we mentioned, why did God
Yeah.
do this? Why did God allow this to be done to me? I've
Mm-hmm.
been a good I've been a good little Christian. I did all the good things. I do prayer group every morning. So now why did this happen to me? Or even, they're struggling with things from childhood, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, what would God, if God is so loving and great and cares about me, why do you let that happen to me as a kid, that now continues to kind of
Mm-hmm.
plague me and get past? I think they could be struggling with thoughts that are creating conflict or doubt in their faith system. And so
Mm.
that's kind of a separate issue, right? There's
Okay.
the literal trauma treatment or therapy, like we got to deal with this real clinical issue. And then there's now this kind of crisis of belief, in their faith, because they're struggling with the why with God, right?
Mm.
Or something else. Maybe they've heard some messaging somewhere that, you know, it was their fault. If their faith had been stronger, it wouldn't have happened. Or if they were a better Christian, they'd be past it by now. Those things don't help.
Right.
And they could be creating the problems as well. So if that duel is going on, I for sure am going to address the trauma,
Mm.
because that's just clinical work. And I
Mm-hmm.
will certainly try to hear them and help them with that faith piece. Ideally, that would be something we could, you know, collaborate and redirect to a leader
Yeah.
in their faith that
Okay.
could provide some sound guidance on, hey, let me help you understand where God is at in this and where he isn't, and
Yeah.
have a healthy perspective on that. I could share certainly some of my opinions, but I feel like for me, it would always be better if I could find somebody in their faith belief system
Yeah.
that they could talk to, that could help them more with that. So that's, I guess, kind of how I would conceptualize answering that question.
Yeah. So, um, so what does it look like in the room when someone's trauma? I mean, you kind of talked a little bit about it. Um, their trauma and their theology are kind of working against each other. How does that look? How does that present for you clinically, maybe, or in your practice? Have you seen?
Well, of course, I mean, I'm a person of faith, and that's kind of the lead out in my life. And I mean, I look at my faith as not so much like I'm a little soldier with a to-do list. I look
Yeah.
at that more as the a place that I go to for comfort,
Yeah.
and I would go to for help if it was trauma or anything that I'm dealing with. So, my response to that would be I would want them to be able to shift to a place where actually their faith could be used as a support to get past the trauma.
Mm.
That they would be actually looking at their faith as not something that's creating a conflict and another piece of distress in the situation, but as one of the strengths
Mm.
that we would be looking to as a support
Mm.
to actually help move past the trauma. So ideally, I, would want them to be able to look at their faith that way
Mm.
and get to that place if they weren't there already. Some people do come in
Yeah.
with that. There's not a struggle between the two. And they are seeing their faith as a strength to help them and a support to help them get past the trauma. But if there is that conflict, ideally we'd like to see that switch
Mm.
take place.
Um, do you think there's such a thing as theologically induced trauma response?
Theologically induced trauma
Trauma
response.
response.
Has somebody like copyrighted this? Is this a real thing? Are you making it up? I gotta know. I haven't
Uh,
heard this.
Actually, how
Is that
about
like a
this?
religious
Can
trauma? Is that kind of the same
Yeah,
idea
so
of
like
like,
can bad theology actually create or deepen clinical trauma?
which, yeah, is kind of like the general idea of religious trauma that people talk
Okay.
about,
Okay.
which is real for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, there's lots of information about that. People who have, entered into, usually it's people who have entered into some kind of religious denomination. They've gotten involved in some kind of church or ministry or community of, this religious belief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like gone very poorly for them. It's
Yeah.
landed in
Mm-hmm.
shaming and rejection and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes abuse. We know that there are tons of, go Google it, tons of reports of pastors and youth pastors sexually molesting congregation members, so they've gotten involved in something that on the surface is this like very inviting, caring, this is a refuge for you. This is
Mm-hmm.
sort of what's put out there. And then it's not that at all. It starts being very horrible for the person. And as a result, the religious trauma, you know, occurs. There's a lot more to religious trauma than that. I'm giving the super, super brief
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
version. Um, but yes, like, so somebody even coming and using the theology
Mm.
control or manipulate, sometimes in those abuse cases, the theology is what's used
Yeah.
to control and manipulate,
Mm-hmm.
and or it's being used in a way that, you know, devalues the person, that dehumanizes them in some way. It's certainly not lifting them up. I mean, it's
Yeah.
doing the opposite because it's creating trauma for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's real. I mean, I think it's a bigger topic. I think maybe where we could shift this, not that that's not important, but I think it's like it's its whole own topic.
It really
But I
is.
think
Yeah.
you're on to that is important is that if somebody is dealing with trauma and they go to, let's say, their pastor for some help, and then the pastor kind of just reads something out of the Bible that isn't helpful
Yeah.
because they don't really understand how the trauma works, and they're not even doing it on purpose. They may even think they're being helpful,
Right.
but then it lands with the person making things worse.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's kind of what you were getting at.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, for sure, it's interesting that you bring that up because a therapist could do that who's not trauma trained.
Oh, wow.
You
Okay.
know, I think anybody could do that. You know, Mary, my great friend down the street, could do that. And the advice she's giving, if you don't understand how trauma affects a nervous system, right,
Oh,
then
right.
whoever you are, you could be saying something that's, making things worse
Yeah.
and not helping.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess maybe part of the reason I asked it was I was talking to my son the other day, and we were talking about we were talking about in a church situation or a Bible study situation. Sometimes people they go deeper than they need to go, you know? So, like, especially, we're just passing Easter. And so there's, how many, what was the cat o' nine tails, and how exactly did, or how many, all the stuff, or they can go back to way, way back to all of the details. But I told my son, I said, I can remember a pastor at a conference or something was talking about if we were on a trip, um, whitewater rafting,
Uh,
and you fell out of the raft, you know, and I go, well, Robert, here's an oar, you know, and here's the Greek word for oar, and here's the historical significance of an oar, and all that kind of stuff. Or we talk about the etymology of the word life preserver. That's not helpful at the moment. What's
right.
helpful is maybe you get out of the raft, or you use that oar to help them get back into the raft. So um, sometimes, at least on my side of things, we we immediately go to, let's maybe they don't understand really what a boat oar is, you know? Maybe they don't really understand what they're going through. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, but can that be explained with this, And so
Yeah.
I do think it's both and, paper or plastic. Yes, it's both. So, um,
Yeah, you made me think of something, David. You made me think of like, you know, you don't always have to have like a theological answer for everything. You don't always have to have a Bible verse for everything. Like the Bible is there to the Bible doesn't address everything. It doesn't
no.
address everything that's in our lives today, but it can be used to inform how we're going to address everything,
Right.
right? And so, but that's very different.
Mm,
Those are different things. And I think that this is a good place for that. Is like you may not have a Bible verse for that person sitting in front of you and what they're
yeah,
dealing with in trauma. But my gosh, you do have a good guide for how to show compassion, right?
absolutely.
You
Yes.
know,
Right.
you do have a good guide for how to show caring, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm,
And so even just remembering that place of it, and that,
mm,
but I think sometimes people, especially if they're in a position of authority,
mm,
and that can be a pastor, a therapist, I mean, anybody, and somebody's coming to them, right?
mm-hmm,
Because
mm-hmm,
they're in a position of authority. I think we get in these spaces where we think we have to have an answer,
mm,
right? So then we come up with one. And the problem with that is maybe you should not have came up with that answer because it's not a good one and it's not helpful.
right.
But that's kind of checking ourselves with like being vulnerable in
Mm,
that come to me, I am in a position of authority. Oh, I'm supposed to have an answer that helps them with this, but I don't know if I really do. So let me just, figure out one, right? That's not a good strategy. It's better
no.
to just be like, I'm not sure, but I'm going to set with you through this. I'm with
Right.
you through it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Totally. It's that
You,
ministry of presence. It's that power of presence that just sitting with someone is maybe even the most and the best thing you can do, right?
for sure, for sure. Or maybe even just doing, I don't know, but now I'm going to help you find who does.
Yeah,
And
that's
we're going
good.
to help get you connected to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
Just, yeah, you just made me think of that because that was such a great thought that you were going with. Um, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
I I don't know if I am or not.
I mean, let's shine the spotlight back on you, my friend,
Oh, wow.
because I know
That's
this
not
has
how this
happened to you.
works. I've got the
Yeah.
controls here. Okay. Anyway.
I somebody comes to you, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
you're the ministry guy, you're the leader, you're the pastor, you're the whatever, and they come to you with, you know, some of these experiences. They come to you in distress. There's this trauma piece that's happening from that perspective, the ministry perspective. I guess I would ask you, you know, well, what do you think is the best way to handle that?
Mm.
And I guess whatever else you want to share about that, where you've seen like maybe
Yeah.
good or bad responses or common mistakes, but also ideally what would be the way that we would want ministry staff, people in churches,
Mhm.
leadership, whatever it may be, to respond.
Yeah, that's good. Um, I think for me, well, first of all, and again, maybe this is just my experience over the years. Um, I think I'm a better counselor in that word of counselor, not like licensed therapist or whatever. But I think I'm a better guide or friend or coach or whatever because I have dealt with some of these issues myself, and I
Yeah,
have found a professional therapist or numerous different one over time. I have found that very helpful. Um, and I think that's the first thing for me. I think um, and maybe because I'm not your average, maybe I'm not your average pastor guy, because I'm willing to say, hey, I'm going to go see somebody else that's not going Bible first, you know? And
yeah,
sometimes in my circles, that's like looked on with maybe some suspicion. Like is there some sort of, you know, wizardry or jiggery pokery going on, with these guys? What are they doing?
people
What's
agree.
yeah, what's going on behind the door,
Yeah.
behind doors kind of thing. Um, but I think the main thing for me, especially when I see somebody come to me and they're really struggling with whatever it might be, I would say, um, well, first of all, God's not, um, he's not silent or he's not like not involved. He cares. First of all, he cares. And the fact that you reached out to me is huge. And I'm honored that you would do that. Um, I've got I've got some friends that they do this professionally and they see this. Would you be willing to, maybe we go together or we talk about how can we make this, I think you would benefit from that. Um, Even as a life coach, I have a client that this person sees both a therapist and I coach them, you know? So it's almost like that's a beneficial thing. And so I think I can even say, I can make a case for my 30 years of pastoral care and pastoral coaching is life coaching too. And so
Mhm.
a coach, a pastor, and therapy can be a positive 2 1 2 combo, you know.
For sure.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that answers that question, but I think I the way I roll is I want to try to stay in my lane as much as possible,
Yeah.
because even the way I view scripture, they may I don't know. I view the scripture through my lens, through a mom and dad that were together their entire life for over, how many ever years. I mean, they met in 1954, and my dad's still here, but they've been together. But if I read, it just like that's my perspective. Um,
Yeah.
Not to say that the Lord doesn't have something to say, and I think He does. I mean, He is with the brokenhearted and those who are struggling with this. What really Now you made me mad. No, I'm just kidding. Now, what really makes me frustrated and angry
Yeah.
is what the 8th century prophets talked about, what Jeremiah talked about of these bad shepherds. You know that they are using the Lord. They're in essence taking the Lord's name in vain. You know, and saying, well, this is what the Lord says through me or through whatever. And then there's that trauma, that maybe is caused by that. And so maybe that's even back in my earlier question to you was built on that. It's
Yeah.
like, what I just want to make sure that we are not causing, the gospel's offensive. Let's not add offense to it, you know?
Right. Or just inaccuracy.
Yes, yes,
I think that
absolutely.
that kind of makes me think of this, what is the ideal collaboration?
Mm,
Uh, which we probably can both talk about. But for sure, I think I love it when I can collaborate with people who are like good, reasonable options for collaboration. When somebody comes in to see me, if you know they're also seeing an occupational therapist or a psychiatrist, or they're also working with a coach or talking to their pastor. I mean, I love to reach out and collaborate with people who it's relevant to collaborate, that are like also providing support, and help for that person. And it's always nice when that can happen, because like you were saying, it's not an either or. It's not like, go visit your pastor and figure this out, or go see a counselor and ignore your help from your spiritual leaders. It's not an either or.
mm,
It's ideally both, and even a collaborative effort of supports. There's some counseling theory that supports that idea, when you're
mm,
working with a client, even, is that you're looking at all their different environments, and where are the strengths and supports in those different places that can be
mm.
utilized to help them with what they're dealing with. So I love it when that can happen. It doesn't always happen. Let's not
Right.
be um, negligent in sharing that some people don't want to collaborate.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we mentioned it in an earlier podcast, maybe. And that all the way around. Some therapists don't want to collaborate. Some pastors don't want to collaborate. Some psychiatrists don't want to collaborate. I mean, some teachers don't want to collaborate,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Right.
So you can always make it happen. But when you can, I think it's very good and useful. And that's kind of the ideal situation.
Hmm.
Uh, but um, I do feel like, back kind of as part of this, what you were saying is, I would want people to know, who are hearing this, like if they found this and they're listening to it, a couple of really main points. One, your faith very much can be and should be a support for you in dealing with trauma. And if you're someplace where the messages you're getting is that it's actually making your trauma worse or
Mm,
shaming you. Something's off. It's not right because 100% God, your faith should be a place where you are finding another support, and we're finding another way to help
mm,
with your trauma. And if it's not landing that way for you, then something is not right.
mm.
Like you're getting the wrong messages
Yeah.
from somebody, or you're dealing with this kind of internal shame and you can't accept
Hmm.
that support from God. But something is going on that, it's not landing right.
Mm.
And on the therapy side, I would say, your therapist should not be villainizing your faith.
Yeah.
They should also be looking at, well, how can we use that
Yeah.
as a strength and a help
Yeah.
to help address your trauma, support for your trauma. Um, so I think it's important for people to understand that about this topic. Trauma is real, it's clinical, it's something that you do need to go get addressed in a clinical way. We know, I mean, my gosh, it's probably one of the areas in mental health care we have tons and tons of research
Yeah.
on. We know how it works, we know how to make it better.
Yeah.
Um, and then if you're a person of faith, you absolutely want God involved in that process. You absolutely want God involved in your life in terms of understanding and working through
Hmm.
with trauma and being
Hmm.
supportive and helpful in you navigating forward. So I really would want people to understand those things very clearly if
Hmm.
they're popping in here and listening
Yeah.
to
For
us
sure.
talk about those.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think an ideal collaboration for me is kind of like what we have, with us or with other people. I've got, I refer out a lot. I think also when when it's something that I'm not good at, or I'm not, it's out of my purview, out of my um, strengths, that
Yeah,
kind of wears me out. First of all, it's draining, but it's also um, it takes me away from what I really ought to be doing, and I'm not really doing that person the best if I'm trying to talk with that's part of it, you know. I may be able to talk about. I obviously would keep continue to meet with them. It's not like I just say, "Hey, go see your therapist. Get out of my
right,
office," you know.
right,
But to say, and honestly kind of check in on them. How's it going
mhm,
with that? I know you before we press record, you asked, hey, how did that meeting go? The other day about
yeah,
something. I think that's
right,
that's just that's the kind of community, and that's kind of the faith community, and even whatever business community I would love to be a part of. To say, okay, so we have some clinicians, and we also have our faith community leaders, but even whatever business folks that are okay with, not okay with, but they embrace that we all have something to bring, to the table. You know,
for
um,
sure.
yeah. So let me ask you the last question out of here.
Okay. Oh boy.
What do
Did you
you
say
wish?
last?
Do what? Yeah, the best for
Did you say
last.
last?
So
Okay.
what would you like? Because I think we have talked a little bit about this. We've
Mhm,
talked in past about what I would want out of a referral counselor. What do
mhm,
you want out of a guy like me? So especially like you deal with like neurodivergent population,
mhm.
and maybe they come to you and they say, "Why in the world would God create this ADHD? My pastor said that it's a demon," or whatever,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
So what do you want from Pastor Guy? What do you want from Pastor David?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I think this is easy for me to answer, partly because Um, I am a person of faith. I've grown up in churches. I still keep that front and center in my life. So I've ran into this personally, not just with clients, but I've been in churches, and there have been times where we've moved or whatever, and we've had to find a new church, and
Right.
you know I will be very honest. I've walked into some new churches, and they clearly didn't support the idea of mental health care, and we didn't come back. I mean,
Mm.
that's what I do as a
Wow.
living, and I believe in it, and I believe God put me in this place to do mental health care. And so, first
Mm.
thing I would say is I would like for you to, understand that mental health care is real, and it's not fake, and it's not demonic, and it actually helps people, and people do at times actually need it. I
Mm.
mean, if I even just got that, I'd probably be satisfied.
Okay.
You wouldn't have to do much of anything else,
Right. Right. Right.
because unfortunately, I still run into
Man.
that thinking that it isn't real, it's made up, it's fake, and it's not biblical, and it's demonic, and whatever. And that's very frustrating,
Mm.
because I know that messaging, if it's actually being believed, and it
Mm-hmm.
probably is, at least in that group of influence, is denying people the help that could really make their lives better.
Mm.
So that would be number one. Number two would be, it'd be great if you were proactive with that, that
Mm.
maybe you did develop a list of referrals that you could give people. I mean, go meet those people. We talked
Yeah.
about this
For sure.
early on. Don't
Mm-hmm.
refer to anybody you're not comfortable with,
Right.
for sure, but go reach out and find people that you're comfortable with so you can give people referrals,
Mm-hmm.
and then be open and willing for that collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
because a support's a support, and your position in that person's life is of importance and can be a great support.
Mm.
So also just being open for that collaboration.
Mm. That's really good. That's really
Yeah.
good. Well, I think this has been a good conversation, and
Yes.
I
Me
think it's
too.
something that we're just going to kind of work our way through some stuff. This next week we're going to talk about emotional Jesus.
Oh
Emotional
boy.
Jesus. Jesus
Yeah.
showed emotions, and
He did.
so
A lot of
um,
them.
a lot, and
Yeah.
you read the book of Psalms, and there's a lot of emotion in those
Yeah.
Psalms and all of it. So, um, is there anything else that we need to cover before we sign off?
I think just, I don't know who will find this podcast and watch it. And if it is somebody watching who is actively dealing with trauma, please just start reaching out
Mm-hmm.
to sources that can help you get to some good mental health care that you feel like is going to work for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't give up until you find that,
Mm.
because it does exist out there, even if you've ran into some ones that weren't helpful.
Yeah.
Keep going until you find, because this is something that you can get help with.
That's awesome. That's a good word. That's a good
Yeah.
word. Well,
Uh,
we are whole. That's Robert. I'm David. And we're talking about kind of where faith and mental health and church kind of intersect. And so, thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, all the stuff, right?
yes.
For our
Please do.
12 followers. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're going to grow it. So great to see
Yeah.
you. Thanks again, and we'll see you
Take
next
care.
time. All right. Bye bye.